It's time for the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is the voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to. Lots to talk about. My favorite tweet from yesterday was from President Joe Biden, where he said, don't inject bleach and don't vote for the guy who told you to inject bleach. Because yesterday was the day that Trump came out and said, hey, if we could introduce some stuff, some light, light bulb up the backside, maybe mainline, some Lysol, maybe you whip the virus. 4 years ago, that was the guy we had in the White House then. He is running again to bring that kind of sage advice back. And I found it interesting because I went and I looked back. Today, the owners of Lysol, Rickett Benheiser, a UK-based company, they own Lysol. They came out with a statement. Yeah, they said, as with all products, our disinfectant and hygiene products should only be used as intended and in line with usage guidelines. Please read the label and safety information. Their spokesperson said, as a global leader in health and hygiene products, we must be clear that under no circumstances should our disinfectant products be administered into the human body through injection, ingestion, or other route. The fact that they had to add the other route, that's frightening. But yeah, congratulations. I know it's hard to remember. 4 years seems like a long time ago. We did, come out of a pandemic. And I get it. It's been a little rough. But it got me thinking that, 4 years ago, things were not great. And when the Republicans, especially that woman from Alabama, the senator there, came out and said, we're better off. Are you better off than you were 4 years ago? Yeah, so much better off than I was 4 years ago, than the country was 4 years ago. And I got to tell you, I think we're in a good place. We're heading in the right direction. The economy is moving in the right direction because we're fundamentally changing things. That's important. I love the fact that, Joe Biden is moving Bidenomics, which means we're going to build an economy from the bottom up. What good is having an economy if a good majority of the people aren't flourishing? If working people aren't able to get ahead? If you're not able to send your kids to college, if you're not able to take a vacation, weather a storm. So what Biden has done, and good on him, it's about time we have an industrial policy, resource some manufacturing, invest in that, invest in infrastructure, some clean energy, expand opportunities for folks. This is what we should want from a president. What's Trump's ideas? Oh, we're just going to cut taxes for rich people. We're going to deregulate rich people even further. How does that trickle down to you or me? Oh, yeah. Doesn't at all. And again, it's about demonizing. It's about, making the Democrats, especially on immigration. Immigration is a huge thing. I've been listening to people, especially my redhead friends, talking about immigration. And it's all this negative, ugly, horrible stuff. And you go, how did your family get here? We came the right way. And how was that? You got on a boat and you showed up. That's how you got here. I'm sure if there were a boat, if we were doing that again, yeah. Now Biden has said, look, we need to do something about the border. Send me a bill. You had one. Why didn't you pass it? Oh, that's right. Trump killed it. Because again, the issue is more important than the solution. They need immigration to make sure that, we keep people blinded by the anger and the hatred. Instead of, hey, how do we fix it? How do we get people here that we need to do the jobs that need to be done? Like, I don't know, picking our fruit and our vegetables. I don't know about you, but I don't want to pay $12 for an apple. So if you can bring people in who want to do that work, hello. But there are so many differences. And then look, that's just part of the economics. For me, it's all about the economics. It's all about the fact that what we've done is we've built an economy that makes rich people richer and poor people, well, expendable. And until we wake up to the reality that everything else is a sideshow, everything else is the cat chasing the laser, the laser that Marjorie Taylor Greene wants to use on the border. Until we figure that out, we're going to continue to get fleeced and angry. I've been saying for a long time, the reason that this country is so angry is the promise that we were told, again, work hard, play by the rules. You can finish the rest of it, get ahead. That's been broken. And until we figure out how to fix that, I don't think the anger goes away. People they don't feel secure. They don't feel stable. At least most of the people I know don't. And look, we're being fed a constant stream of misinformation. The economy's doing fairly well. And yet you see report after report, Republicans say, it's in the tank. It's the worst economy ever. It's the worst economy ever. I literally had a red hat tell me it is the worst economy ever. Ever? Did you forget about the Great Depression? Did you forget about the Great Recession just a couple of years ago? Have you forgotten, about the booms and busts of the 1800s? Those were, people were starving. Are you hungry today? No? Then I got to question that worst economy ever thing. But again, we're told this. We're fed a steady stream of dis and misinformation. So that we do what? We don't question why our wages haven't kept up with inflation for the last 40 years. And look, wages are rising faster than inflation right now. That's a reality. But you ask the average person, they don't know that. Ask them the last 40 years, has it kept up with inflation? And I think you would get a crazy answer. But I was just telling somebody the other day, 30 years ago, I had a much better standard of living, a much higher income, based on the wages that I earned, because I earned higher wages for the day. When you do all that economic wizardry, add inflation into it, there's a beautiful calculator over at the Bureau of Labor Statistics that can help you go back. What were you making in 1979? You can figure out what would it be in today's dollars. And how we can, do it again. We've got a massive problem in this country. Inequality is a massive problem. But yet we're still focused on who's going to what bathroom. We're still focused on all of the things that the others, the things that are meant to keep us pitted against each other. My gun friends are like, Biden's going to take our guns. And I'm going, did I miss that? Where's that going to happen? I haven't heard Biden talk about guns. So where's this? Oh, you've heard that on one of those. Okay, I got you now. How's the economy doing? It's terrible, worst ever. So I'm telling you, we're in this place where we need facts, we need good reporting, we need accurate reporting, but we also need to talk to each other and question each other. So when I said, worse than the Great Depression, the answer was like, well, maybe not that bad, but we're going to get there. And you go, no, we're never going back to that. But it's all about believe. It's not about fact anymore. And this is what the Trump era has brought us. Alternative facts, alternative realities. I got to tell you, we need somebody in the White House who's going to move things in the right direction. I think Joe Biden's that guy. And I look at the fact that he's got really good people in good places. And when we come back, I'm going to talk about one of those. Stick around. This is The Rick Smith Show.
We are AFGE, the American Federation of Government Employees. We represent 700,000 federal and D.C. government workers who are the vital threads of the fabric of American life. We support our nation's military. We take care of our nation's veterans. We protect our nation's borders. We respond to our nation's crises and natural disasters. We provide services to our nation's seniors. The American Federation of Government Employees. We work for America.
We are AFGE, the American Federation of Government Employees. We represent 700,000 federal and D.C. government workers who are the vital threads of the fabric of American life. We support our nation's military. We take care of our nation's veterans. We protect our nation's borders. We respond to our nation's crises and natural disasters. We provide services to our nation's seniors. The American Federation of Government Employees. We work for America.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So as I've said a number of times, I love a lot of Joe Biden's appointments. I love the folks at the Department of Labor, the people at the NLRB, Jennifer Abruzzo, one of my favorites, Lina Khan over at the Federal Trade Commission. Because on Tuesday, the Federal Trade Commission, they voted on a final rule that would ban this thing called non-competes, declaring them unfair methods of competition and doing away with a good many of them. And as we talked about, about 12 years ago, there was that sandwich shop, Jimmy John's, who tried to make their workers sign non-compete agreements, basically making peanut butter and jelly proprietary. So if you make sandwiches for us, you sign this agreement, you can go nowhere else, which is crazy. Which is why I think they should have been banned a long time ago, and good on this administration for moving forward, which is why I've asked Morgan Harper to come talk with us. She's the Director of Policy and Advocacy at the American Economic Liberties Project, economicliberties.us, their website. We're going to find out what that vote was. Morgan, thanks for taking time for us.
Thanks for having me. Good to be back.
So what happened?
Yeah, so yesterday was a huge day for anyone who cares about freedom, which I know is a really broad statement, but I mean it. It was a big deal that the Federal Trade Commission voted 3-2 to finalize this ban on non-competes. And, I don't think it's that surprising that we had the three commissioners that have been in place for a while, based on, like you're saying, what we've seen from this administration. It's been pretty pro-worker: Lina Khan, Becca Slaughter, Alvaro Bedoya. But we have two new commissioners who have joined since the last time we spoke. And unfortunately, they voted against the non-compete, which isn't good. But overall, this rule is huge. I mean, just like ticking through some of the impacts, this is probably going to impact like 30 million workers across the country who are dealing with these non-competes in positions from what you referenced, just sandwich shops, beauticians, sales positions, all the way up to folks like engineers and physicians who have been trapped and limited in their employment choices because of these non-compete clauses.
Now, I had read something not too long ago that said, the economic impact of this and what the Federal Trade Commission is saying is these are unfair methods of competition. It's stifling wages, it's holding wages down. And they said, what I read was somewhere in the range of $300 billion each and every year, that this thing that most people have never heard of is suppressing wages, and that by doing away with this, maybe working people get a fair shot.
Exactly. And actually their estimate from the proposed rule. So, there's this whole process whenever an agency does a rulemaking. We got the proposed rule and then the final rule. So yesterday was the final rule, which means in 120 days, this becomes law. And they increased their estimate of what the economic impact is going to be from $300 billion to over $400 billion. They're estimating will increase more money in workers' pockets, in addition to some other things like around innovation. So they think there'll be almost a 3% uptick in new business formation. Over 8,000 new businesses, they estimate, will be created because of this freedom that we'll all have as workers to leave a job, start our new business, apply the expertise that we have. And they also are estimating that the final rule is going to lower healthcare costs by quite a bit because of how much more money some healthcare institutions are able to charge because they're locking physicians into these contracts as well. So that's another big deal. They're estimating that maybe as much as $194 billion in savings for healthcare expenses because of this new mobility that physicians will be able to enjoy.
Are there, because this seems to be a partisan issue for me, because when the Jimmy John's thing came up, I would say, is peanut butter and jelly proprietary? Can you only make it here? Now, I understand it's not enforceable at that level, but, most employees don't know that, and most people don't want the hassle of fighting with a company over it. And most people just sign it because, hey, I need the job. You don't have any other choice. But is there any arena where these non-competes are something that should be around, or is this something that should never happen?
Well, it's a great question. And, the FTC had some choices here in how they were going to proceed. I mean, there's been, like, for example, in New York State, there was an effort to try to get this type of non-compete ban. And then people were arguing to get a carve out for certain professions and all of that. I think the FTC took a great approach here in that they are banning them for all workers under their jurisdiction. So that doesn't mean, 100% everybody, because there's some, little market, like, for example, the FTC doesn't have full jurisdiction over all nonprofits, for example. There's some areas where maybe they didn't touch it, but for the most part, the vast majority of workers in the US now, all across the socioeconomic spectrum, regardless of what kind of job you have, you will no longer be able, your employer will no longer be able to start a new non-compete contract with you or make you sign that. And you're absolutely right in terms of, even if it's lower level, they're probably never going to go after you. There's a huge chilling effect to these agreements where you don't feel like you actually have the ability to change as quickly. You are worried that if a big, large corporation did decide to ever enforce it, you would never be able to have the legal resources to match that kind of challenge. And so they definitely were having an impact. So that's why it's so important that the FTC, looking forward, no non-competes for any worker at any level.
No, to highlight what you said, Morgan, the reality is I remember when I first started working, I was chasing nickels. If the guy across the street was paying 5 cents more, that's where I was going. And if someone else down the road was paying a little bit more because I needed the money. And that's the reality. If you wanted to keep me, you were going to have to match that. And a lot of times employers did. So by having this non-compete, especially in the lower rung, as you pointed out, people don't have the resources. I didn't have $300 an hour to pay a lawyer when I only made $300 a week.
Right.
I mean, and I think they know that. And this is another example of corporations knowing that they have outweighed power over their workers, and they have the ability to force things on them, like non-compete agreements, like forced arbitration clauses. We could go on. But this, again, for me, this administration taking this on is important.
It is. And, I will say there was one clarification that the Federal Trade Commission made in the final rule in that. So if you have, the existing non-compete agreement, so for people who are already in a job where one of these clauses was part of your employment contract, those are now going to be unenforceable. Right. And so you can now, if your employer does try to do that really messed up thing and intimidate you to think that this thing applies and you can't go to some employer across the street, you will now be able to say, hey, wait a second, the Federal Trade Commission just banned these things and you have no right over me in this way, right? But what they said was, if you're a senior, what they're calling a senior executive, if you're somebody that's making over $151,000 a year and if you have policy-making or like decision-making authority at the company you work at, then your non-compete agreement, if it's existing, holds in place. So again, anything moving forward, banned, regardless of what type of worker you are. But just for those that are already in place, they did carve out a little bit of the senior executive. And their reasoning there was, these executives, they are able maybe to like seek legal counsel when these things are getting negotiated, if you're making big bucks and you have that available. But why they included them in the ban moving forward is even the senior executive that gets counsel on one of these things, their inability to change jobs hurts innovation, like that new business formation thing that we're talking about. They also aren't able to, be entrepreneurs, and that hurts the overall economy. That's not competitive, right? So just to clarify that point. But yeah, I mean, this is really huge in terms of being able to put power on the side of workers. I agree with you that this issue should be bipartisan, but unfortunately what we saw in this vote, those 2 votes that I said from the commissioners that voted against banning non-competes did come from Republican appointees to the Federal Trade Commission. And that's a shame because this should be uncontroversial. If you believe in workers having rights, if you believe in people being able to make money and have some control over their lives, then we should not have non-compete agreements.
Yeah, but that's if you believe that. I mean, the reality is we live in an environment and have for a very long time where Republicans have been on the side of big business and the power of big business, and some corporate Democrats as well. I'm not letting them off the hook. There have been people who are like, I don't care. I don't care about that working person. It's all about the company, and anything that they get out of it will somehow maybe possibly trickle down. Never does, but that's the theory. So I get why the two Republicans would be against workers, because I say it all the time. Republicans hate working people. Look at what they do. And here, look at what they did.
Yeah. It is really a shame, but you're right. I mean, we're in this era now, we're seeing it in lots of different facets, within the administration, not just the Federal Trade Commission, the National Labor Relations Board. You said Abruzzo, General Counsel Abruzzo is your girl there, right? I mean, they're doing a lot of things that are moving power back on the side of workers. The other thing in this rule that's relevant, I would say, is they also are banning, for the most part, traps, these training repayment programs where, I don't know if you've heard about these, but we actually had some of these in Ohio where I live, where you're working at like a massage therapist center, right? Or, massage envy, not massage envy, but, something like that. And that if you're working at one of those, they had non-competes on those, right? Or if you had gotten training to learn how to be a masseuse, that if you left, they were going to charge you for that training that they gave you to be able to perform your job. So these traps are a whole nother area of, kind of like non-compete like agreements that maybe they didn't have that exact terminology, but that through what the FTC has been doing here with this rule, through the work of some researchers that were making this connection, that these things are effectively non-competes and they should be banned too. And the Federal Trade Commission did include those in the rule as well.
I mean, look, in my world in trucking, you saw that all the time. We'll train you to get your CDL, but if you leave, before 2 years, you got to pay us the $20,000 in training that we got you. So you're not going to go, and they know you're not going to go anywhere, and that's why they don't give you any decent wages.
Right.
The same thing with lease agreements. They con these truck drivers into getting these lease agreements, pay them penny wages, and then say, hey, in 7 years you could own this thing. It'll all be yours. And what you got is a pile of junk, and they know it. And these unfair things, it's not new. This stuff's been going on for decades. Just finally someone's doing something about it. And, it's not just this. I mean, I was talking to somebody the other day, and there's a lot of union organizing going on. And I go, I'm surprised that, more workers aren't getting fired in these, because our labor laws are so pathetic. Wage theft is another thing. You'll get thrown in jail if you steal a peppermint patty. But if the boss steals your wages, slap on the wrist. Oh, don't do it again.
Yeah, I think it's such an important point too, because like you're saying, I mean, the reason why we're seeing more organizing is because workers' unions do know that they have an NLRB, DOJ that, kind of from this administration that have their backs. So there's some room to be a little bit more aggressive. A lot of times, especially, we're in an election year, I think people tend to focus just on the options for president, but we should spend as much time focused on who are these people that are populating the agencies that have all of this legal authority that can make decisions about, are we going to make the path easier for big business and the wealthy, or are we going to make it easier for the working people? And we've seen from this administration, it has consistently been the latter over the last 3 years. And I know, in some ways, maybe a surprise to some, but it's happening, it's real. But we should also be aware of the counterattack is going to be just as strong. So with this non-compete rule, even, a couple of weeks ago before the final rule dropped, we heard that the U.S. Chamber of Commerce at a big public event confirming they plan to challenge this thing right away and try to get it declared illegal for the FTC to ban non-compete. So we have to be vigilant and just continuing to get the word out about how important it is to ban these things, and that this is what the American people want.
No, this is another one of those issues, the old labor frame of which side are you on? This is another one of those issues. Are you on the side of big money and corporate power, or are you on the side of the person who has to clean up their mess, has to make them their profits? And look, I look at the two presidential candidates. It's simple for me. I know who Donald Trump appointed to these positions in the past. Eugene Scalia as the head of the Department of Labor. Are you freaking kidding me? A corporate lawyer who is a union buster. I'm sorry, I've seen this movie. It's bad.
Yeah,
I like what I see out of this administration.
Oh, sorry, I didn't.
No, I said I like what I see out of this administration.
Exactly. And I think increasingly what we're seeing too, and this holds true for the non-compete rule too, is it's not even like entirely bigger businesses versus smaller and worker. It's like increasingly it's just like the monopolists, the largest of the large that are controlling such a huge swath of the economy and everybody else. So there's actually businesses of pretty good size. And we saw even already, yesterday after the rule dropped, some business groups that were coming out saying, this is great. This is going to help us innovate more. This is going to make it easier for people who want to be entrepreneurs. And so I think it's important for us to, keep clear on whose side. It's not only, just two sides. It's actually two sides that are like 50-50. It's like a 99% and then a 1%. And we need to stay clear on that. The other thing I would mention is a common argument, which I'm sure we're going to hear from the chamber and others is, we have to have these agreements to protect proprietary information like the magic that is a peanut butter sandwich or whatever in your Jimmy John's example, or trade secrets that are involved in corporations that maybe work in tech or some other industries. And the thing is, they can still contract around that. If there's proprietary information you don't want workers talking about, then you need to make a contract that's about proprietary information. But that doesn't mean that you get to keep treating people like indentured servants who happen to be your employees at some point.
Yeah, no, and here's the thing. If they're that valuable, maybe you should pay to keep them.
Or that.
Final example. I mean, I look at, again, this administration, they've got someone in charge of the wage theft division of the Department of Labor who hasn't committed wage theft. I go back to the Trump administration.
Right.
It is what it is.
The leadership has been great.
So last question I've got for you. Obviously this is a step in the right direction. What's next?
So what's next is hopefully at an effective date. Like I said, 120 days before the rule becomes final. Right now, it's just been finalized with a vote, but it still has to get into the Federal Register. We anticipate there will be a lawsuit that'll try to block that implementation of the rule. And then it'll be up to a judge to decide whether or not to put the rule implementation on hold, mean that it's not effective until the resolution of that lawsuit. Hopefully a judge would still allow the rule to continue, but that's a TBD. But what we know for sure here is that the FTC is on really strong legal ground. They lay out their legal reasoning for why they have the authority to do this deal. We know that to do this rule. We know that there's so many people across the country who would benefit from this rule. And so we just need to continue to get the word out about how impactful and positive a rule that's banning non-competes like the one the FTC just finalized is going to be for the American economy and workers.
No, it's good stuff. As opposed to, the argument that they're making, as opposed to the other side, I don't wanna. It is what it is.
You got to play fair. You can still make some money, but you just can't treat people like. Sorry.
There you go.
That's my final word.
Morgan, I appreciate the time. Always great seeing you. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Morgan Harper, Director of Policy and Advocacy there at the American Economic Liberties Project. Check out their website, American Economic Liberties.us. We will get links out on social media how you can take a look at that. Going to take a quick break. Back with your thoughts. Stick around.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So, saw an interesting article written by our good friend Will Bunch, talking about the movie Civil War, and pointing out the fact that it's really not about about the country; it's about journalism, and it piqued my interest. This idea that right now we're in a post. An alternative facts world. We're in a post-fact world, it seems to me, that we can't seem to agree on, anything anymore. Where in the old days, at least we agreed on something. Sky was blue, roads need to be paved, whatever. So here to share some thoughts on his most recent article titled Civil War is Terrifying, not for what it says about America, but about journalism. That's why I've asked Will Bunch to come talk with us, national columnist at the Philadelphia Enquirer, also the author of After the Ivory Tower Falls, how college broke the American dream and blew up our politics and how to fix it. Will, thanks for taking time for us.
Yeah, Rick, thanks for having me back. I really appreciate it.
So, this movie, I haven't seen it yet. I've seen stories and clips and all that stuff.
Right.
Walk me through some of it.
Yeah, so obviously, at a moment when everybody's focused on how divided the country is and the increase in political violence, and I've seen more people talking about the possibility of some kind of second civil war in this country more in the last few years than any time in my life. And
not just talking about it, Will. I know people who want it. They're hoping for, prepping for it. I know people who've got guns and rice buried all over the place.
Yeah, and I think that's what inspired this Alex Garland, who's a British filmmaker. I think that's what inspired him to make the movie, right? It's like, well, if everybody's talking about this, well, what would it look like? And so the thing about Civil War is, it's a very visual movie. It's an hour and 49 minutes, and almost every minute there are scenes that are supposed to shock you about what it would be like in America if we had, years of civil war with armed militias and conflict between different factions. And, he comes up with some crazy geographic alliances. There's been a lot of talk about how the main rebel army taking on what's left of the U.S. government is the Western Alliance, which is this bizarre teaming up of Texas and California. So, and, I think it was a device, just like you said, you've read a lot about the movie, so you probably know that he really tried to avoid tough political questions. It's not a movie about conservatism or liberalism or socialism or, none of that really factors into this movie at all.
Yeah, my sense is it's just violence porn.
Yeah. I was literally opening my mouth to utter those exact two words, because that is what it is. In addition to the shock of seeing bombed out strip malls and JCPenney blown up, although most JCPenney's kind of look blown up these days anyway, but McMansions and all these staples of modern American life, what they would look like if a Syria style, civil war came to this country. And, there's an element of, are the chickens coming home to roost? The main character played by Kirsten Dunst is this veteran, heroic war photographer, photojournalist who, shot Haiti and Iraq. And there are a couple like split second flashbacks to the things she saw in other countries. And now they're happening here. And it's an interesting point that he doesn't really develop. But, like I said in my piece, the thing that holds together the movie's kind of thin narrative is the idea of journalism. You have these four journalists on this circuitous road trip from New York to Washington, D.C., where the government's about to fall, or they believe the government's about to fall. And they're determined to, it's like if the government's going to fall, they want to get the picture. We need
the clicks, man. We need the clicks.
Yeah. Well, it's weird though. They never like post on Twitter or anything like that, which I thought was bizarre. There's definitely some weird logistical stuff going on in the movie, which I won't get off on that. But
I think the idea is, from what I've read and the few things that I have seen, is this idea that it actually can happen here, because if you would have asked me 10 years ago, would we be in the position that we're in now, a president on trial, this tearing apart of us in ways where families are broken up, I would have said no, that can't happen here. But it is. Yeah, when I was a young adult in my 20s in the 80s when Reagan was president, if you remember, there were some movies like there was the movie Red Dawn, right, where Russians invade the United States, or there was a kind of a now famous miniseries on ABC called America with a K, in which Russia, takes over the United States. And obviously these fantasies were built not around Civil War, but losing the Cold War. But the idea was, war and tanks inside the United States and going past McDonald's. And isn't that crazy? Could that even ever happen? And now it's like people go into the theater knowing
hell yeah, this could happen. This could happen, in a couple months,
And some people want it. I mean, I remember those
Yeah.
things like you do, like, and I remember them being not as a, hey, pick a side, but hey, we're all on our side. Let's move towards this not happening, as opposed to, hey, here's our blueprint.
Yeah, but also, it was kind of like science fiction. It's like, wow, can you imagine this like crazy future where there's a war on U.S. soil, whereas it doesn't feel like science fiction anymore, right? So, yeah. So I mean, the point I tried to make, and why, the movie clearly is about journalism, and there's a couple ways to look at it. On one hand, the devotion of Kirsten Dunst and the other three journalists to get the story, to get the to chronicle in pictures, what really happened to the government, to get a quote from the president of the United States. Clearly, we live in an age where disinformation and misinformation, we're just drowning in it, right? So there's definitely a nobility to trying to depict the actual truth of what is happening in this country, and certainly the characters in the movie try to do that, and they show how dangerous journalism could be in a situation like that, and with a record number of journalists dying all over the world right now, that's a powerful message too. But what bothered me is, there was no sense that maybe journalism could be a tool for somehow making America better, right? Or, nobody's trying to save America at this point, and it's pretty clear from the movie that nobody's been trying to save America for a long time. The kind of key quote in the movie about journalism and what their purpose is Kirsten Dunst tells her young protege that we record so that other people ask the questions. Which, all right, well, who are these question askers? Because they should be out there asking, why America became a fascist country, and I just thought it was so relevant to what's happening in our real non-fictional America right now.
Right.
We have too many people in the mainstream media are both sidesing, if that's the right term, this presidential race between one party that has gone totally authoritarian or fascist or whatever you want to call it, and another party that in its own flawed way is trying to save democracy. And we just need an incredible sense of urgency right now about this situation. And
well, let me ask you this though, because I just talked about this the other day. I don't think the vast majority of people, because I've heard this argument, Biden's running on, we're going to save democracy. And Trump's clearly with his Project 2025 and Schedule F and all of that stuff, clearly about bringing patronage back and authoritarian rule. And, of course, all of his, revenge and retribution and, all of his petulance is coming back. But I argued that, for a lot of people, democracy I don't think really matters. Because they're not free in their lives. They go to work, they're barely making it by. If you had an authoritarian leader who says, "Look, the trains are going to run, you're going to have food on your table, a roof over your head," I think a good portion of this country would be okay with it.
Sure, that's the message that Trump's been trying to run on really since 2016 when he said, "I alone can fix it." He's I wrote last year about all the so-called intellectuals, quote unquote, on the right, talking about how we need a red Caesar, which is their term for somebody who will just blow by the Constitution. And part of the problem is, you wouldn't even want that to get things. You wouldn't want that. You wouldn't want to make the trains run on time that way anyway. But what's even worse is that's not even really what Trump wants to do. He wants retribution. That's what he says. He said at that rally in Waco, I am your retribution. And, he's going to leave the specifics of authoritarianism to the Heritage Foundation people who are doing the Project 2025 blueprint for him. And he's going to focus on, sending Democrats and journalists to jail, freeing the January 6th prisoners that he calls hostages, revenge. That's gonna be his priority, and it's gonna be done in an authoritarian way. And
but again, coming back to this movie, I mean, this is a cautionary tale of the hellscape that could potentially happen given the road that we're on, and that's frightening.
It is, but one thing about the movie is, the journalists are the good guys, right? But in terms of people fighting for control of the country, there are no good guys and bad guys. I mean, you get the sense. I mean, this Western alliance. I mean, they shoot people rather than take prisoners. Without giving too much away, they're just as deadly and violent as the government is. So, so who are the good guys? I think you might be frightened and maybe a little bit demoralized by seeing this movie, but it's not going to give you any kind of sense of how do we that was my take on it. This doesn't give you a feeling of how do you avoid fascism.
This is just entertainment. It's violence porn if that's your thing, but it's not going to move you in any direction that's going to be helpful. Because here's the thing, and this is as a journalist, and you are a journalist. Can you point to a time when it was fair and balanced, where we all agreed on certain facts? Because I've had this argument before, and one of the arguments that keeps being thrown back at me is, we were divided, we were partisan, people had different directions they wanted to go, but they all wanted to do it for the benefit of the country. They were all working to make things better in their minds. Right now, I fear that the people who are pushing from the right are trying to tear this country down and tear it apart.
Yeah, well, I mean, look at public education, for example. Right, it's a perfect example. Everything the Republican Party has been doing the last few years, none of it is about what parents want, which is making the schools better, making sure the schools have the financial support that their kids need to make sure that they have textbooks and that they can hire the best teachers. And
it's about tearing things apart. Just yesterday we talked about the Lieutenant Governor of Texas, calling for an end to property taxes in Texas, which would directly destroy public education, which is what they want. As you pointed out, it really is on their wet dream list.
Yeah, I mean, when you talk about how things have changed, I think back when, the fights that they had in Congress, which were not that difficult to resolve, would be, the government has to do certain things. It has to build roads. It has to, build dams. It has to fix bridges. And, the Democrats might come in as like, all right, we need $1 trillion. And the Republicans would come in and say, well, no, we should only spend $500 billion because we have to be responsible. And they'd argue and they'd make a deal to, to fund the government at $750 billion.
And then give the other money to corporations to put in their pockets. Let's not give them the high road of being fiscally responsible, because the majority of our debt is their fault. But go ahead.
Yeah. Well, like you said, you're never going to have a perfect time. On one hand, you and I can have a long discussion of Reagan in the 80s and all the terrible things that the Reagan administration and the Republicans did at that time. But at the same time, Reagan did, when Social Security was in crisis, he came up with a plan. You might not like the way he did it with the payroll tax, but he did try and save Social Security. When people said your tax cuts have gone too far, there's a gigantic deficit. He's like, all right, well, we'll raise taxes back up a little bit. That wouldn't happen today. He wouldn't, or Republicans today wouldn't try and fix those problems. So I think that's the difference. You should never say, oh, in the 50s or the 80s, or go back to any fixed time and say things were perfect, because, any era in American history, I can tell you about some terrible things.
We've always had struggles. And, for me, and this is where, and I'm rarely positive, this is where the positivity in me and loving this country going, we've had rough times before. We literally had a civil war and we got through it. And this idea, this quest for a more perfect union is something that, as a young kid, I learned about and I've internalized and I believe we can get past this. I believe we can find a way at some point to reunite, even with the moneyed interests and all of the people pushing division.
Yeah, I mean, the bad news is if you go through history, when a country gets really far off the rails, a lot of times something pretty bad has to happen, right, before people wake up and realize, and we don't want that, or we don't want a civil war, we don't want a war with major war with other countries. I don't want any war with any other countries, but a revolution, no. I mean, I want to see some radical changes in this country myself, but I wouldn't want to see them through a revolution because that would be undemocratic. I want to see, I think most polls show a majority of Americans want a lot of the same things that I want, a higher minimum wage and other type of reforms that would make this country better. It's just the disconnect, which well about, moneyed interests and other things that block the popular will of the people from happening in this country. So if we can somehow break that logjam, yeah, there's definitely reason to be optimistic. It's because I think you and I both know that most people want things that would make America better. It's just the system has malfunctioned to a point that we can't have those things.
Yeah,
right
we do want to make America great, just not through the Trump vision. Which you attended one of the rallies recently. What was that like?
Yeah, well, it's funny because that plays in exactly to what you and I have just been talking about, which is, to me, the theme was just disinformation. I talked to maybe 20, 25 people, 30 people. I don't know. I talked to a lot of people on the line waiting to get into the rally, just because that's the reason I went there. Was I didn't care about the rally itself. I wanted to take the pulse of who's still out there enthusiastic about Trump after all the last crazy 8 years, and what's motivating them. And people talk to me. Not everybody wanted to give their name, but people were happy to tell me what they think of the current political situation in this country. And what they think is, it's just a giant cloud of disinformation has settled over these people. It's like you can't convince them that this isn't the worst economy in American history. You can't convince them that.
But they're fed, they're clothed, they've got a roof over their head. They drove there.
Well, that's the other thing.
They're buying $40 hats made in China. They're completely dressed up in $400 Trump shoes. But it's the worst economy ever.
Yeah, I know that. I mean, they want that's exactly right. They want you to know how well they're doing personally. It's that, it's more, the mentality behind the Trump voter has always been more, hey, I'm doing well, but I didn't go to that fancy elite college that you went to, but yet I'm still making enough money to buy a powerboat or something like that. And why do you look down on me? Why don't you give me credit? Why does society look down on me for not having a fancy college degree or for something else? And so so they resent the people they think are looking down on them, which are Democrats, liberals, college professors, journalists, movie stars,
the next door neighbors.
They don't resent CEOs who outsource jobs or that sort of thing. Those people are fine, but college professors are threatening their way of life. So
very twisted. But Will, I appreciate the time. I appreciate the work you do over there at the Enquirer. Always great time talking with you. I appreciate it.
Yeah, Rick, it's always fantastic. Thanks for having me. I really enjoyed it.
Our good friend Will Bunch. Want to hear your thoughts? Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Are we on the brink? Is it possible that we could end up in a civil war? Sure hope not. But like I said, I do know a lot of people who are hoping and praying, literally praying for a civil war. Want to hear your thoughts? Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Quick break, right back. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1999. A headline from the Los Angeles Times declared dock crews to halt work in support of death row inmate. Up and down the West Coast, the ports stood silent. The International Longshoremen and Warehousemen's Union had called their members off the job for a one-day strike. They did this to protest the death sentence for Mumia Abdul-Jamal. Mumia was a black activist and journalist who was on death row accused of killing a police officer in Philadelphia. Yet many peace and justice activists in the United States and beyond have questioned the evidence leading to his conviction. In October of 1998, the Pennsylvania State Supreme Court rejected an appeal from Mumia. Jack Heyman, a member of the executive board of the Longshoremen's Union in San Francisco, explained the context of his union's protest in a piece he wrote for the San Francisco Chronicle. He wrote, quote, "Labor and minorities share a common history of being victimized by the criminal justice system in this country. Both have long been aware of police repression and the unequal use of the death penalty against minorities and the poor. From the Haymarket martyrs who rallied workers for the 8-hour day to Harry Bridges, the Longshore Union leader targeted for deportation for being a Red, to the Black Panther Party whose program of self-defense put it on the FBI's list. In San Francisco, longshoremen chanted, "An injury to one is an injury to all. Free Mumia Abu-Jamal." Protests against Mumia's execution took place across Europe in cities like London, Madrid, Dublin, and Amsterdam, and by unions in France, Brazil, and South Africa. After 30 years on death row, Mumia's sentence was commuted to life without parole. He is still in prison. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So I want to pick up on something that Will Budge said a minute ago, because I think it's important. To understand. I think all Americans want the same things. I've said this before. I think all Americans, regardless of their political affiliation, deep down, when you talk to them individually, get them in groups like at a Trump rally, forget it, all bets are off. But individually, when you talk to people, they want basically the same stuff, especially when you're talking about working people. You know, we want good jobs. We want fair wages. We want opportunities. We want economic stability. To me, that just makes sense. You want work hard, play by the rules, get ahead. That get ahead part should be there without question. You want safety and security. You want to make sure your neighborhoods are safe, your communities are safe. You want to make sure that when your kids are walking home from school, they're going to be okay. I don't know that this is all that hard. They want high quality public education, affordable college, options for kids who don't want to go to college, vote tech stuff. They want opportunities. And yet all we keep hearing from, especially from the Republicans, more tax cuts for rich people, privatization. You know, you ask the average American what's important to them: affordable quality, high quality health care. When they get sick, they don't want to go broke. When little Susie falls and breaks her arm, you want to take her to the hospital and not be, hey, is this going to bankrupt us? You know, we want a safe environment. We want clean air, clean water, clean natural surroundings. We want to leave something worth inheriting to those children that we care about. We want good infrastructure. We want good roads. We want good bridges. We want public transit. We want utilities that work and aren't going to go out and, well, not gouge us. You know, there are a lot of things that could bring us together. We want strong communities. We want vibrant communities. We want opportunities to connect socially and culturally and have civic engagement. We want to have all those things. But it seems that what they've figured out how to do is slice, dice, divide, and pit us against each other. And again, you come back to, individually, every one of those Trump people at the rally, they want the same thing that I want, that you want. Deep down, they want to be treated fairly. They've been told that they're the victims. They want to be treated justly. They've been told that they're not. Repeatedly. And who is it? Well, it's those people. And, fill in the blank of who those people are. Those people du jour. Based on race, gender, orientation, religion, whatever. Color of your hair. We want the same stuff. We believe, for the most part, and I've had these conversations with red hats for a couple of years now, where once you strip down the groupthink, what is it that you individually want? They want economic stability. They want personal freedom. They want the things that everyone values because they're American values. And the sad reality is, and I actually don't know where all this is coming from, but there's a lot of organized money going into tearing us apart in this country. And as I said a minute ago, we had our divisions in the past, but I believed back then everyone was trying to make this country the best it could be. They had different views, different values, different visions, but it was still about making this country the best it can be. I look at the Make America Great crowd, and it's not about that. It's about exacting revenge and retribution. It's about enriching the handful over everyone else. It's about hooray for me and the heck with everyone else. And that is a problem. That's not the America that I grew up in. It's not the America I grew up believing. And for me, we are in this really interesting moment. And I think Will hit on it, where our media, I don't half the time know who to believe because there's so much disinformation out there. There's so much, BS to have to wade through. But I still have faith in us. I still have faith at the end of the day. We are going to come back together. We are going to reunite. And we are going to make it better for our kids. I want to hear your thoughts. If you missed any portion of the program, podcast, thericksmithshow.com. Want to hear from you? Email rick@thericksmithshow.com. I do answer all emails personally. And as always, thanks so much for being here. We'll see you back here next time.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Email Rick at rick@thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.